Okay, you're ready. Okay, our next presenter is Carole-Ann Berlioz, and Carole-Ann is co-founder and chief product officer at Sparkling Logic. And I also have to tell you that Carole-Ann in DecisionCAMP from the very beginning, all 15 years, and she was the person who actually gave the name DecisionCAMP, and she is very actively involved in organization and always present something interesting. And just recently, you can look on dmcommunity.org. You can see that Sparkling Logic announced the first generative AI tool, assistant for decision modeling. It could be quite interesting, but her today presentation would be about deployment of decision services under uncertainty. So, Carole-Ann.
Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, before Decision Camp, it was was it Rules Fest? Sorry, not Oktoberfest,
Yes.
but named after Oktoberfest. Um, so hopefully you like the name that we gave it. So I'm not going to talk about ChatGPT, although it's quite an exciting usage. I want to go back to more practical considerations about for practitioners that are using decision management tools. I feel quite sorry I missed the presentation just before me. I definitely need to go back to the recording because it sounds like it's very complementary to my presentation, and it seems like we might have a lot to chat about and to discuss to explore more best practices in this world of testing. So I'll have more questions once I watch that video. Um, when the reason I'm interested in the topic of deployment and testing is that although I'm my core responsibility i- is to manage the products at Sparkling Logic and the vision for the products. I do like to be involved with actual customer implementations. So I participate in a lot of implementations. I get my hands dirty. And deployment is something that seems simple. We keep saying we just have to click on a button to deploy our strategies, our decision logic. But there is more to deployment than just clicking on the button and pushing new business rules into production. And I think that's a topic that is not often covered as part of our practitioners' presentation. So there you go. Give me a second trying to get to the next slide. So nobody cares about my bio. I'll just jump to the next slide. So obviously, the bulk of the work that we do for those projects is in authoring. Spend so much time uh, trying to extract rules from the head of the experts or whatever documentation is available for the implementation of the system. So a lot of the talks, a lot of um, the the considerations are about best practices to define your decision models and things like that. And yes, there is ChatGPT that can help you accelerate all of that. And there are some other techniques that can really accelerate all of that. But once this task is completed, you're not done. You really need to deploy, and that's the end goal. The end goal is really to automate the decisions. So you want to, you need to go through this deployment task. Um, and the key benefit of rules engine and decision management system is to make that task very painless. And because it's painless, we don't talk about it too much. We just say there's no IT involvement. You click on the button. There will be no downtime for your systems. All of your decision logic can upgrade very seamlessly. what I would like to focus on is really what happens around this deployment. How can you feel good about what you're pushing into your production systems, especially in the context of uncertainty? So in this presentation, I'm not going to talk at all about the deployment architecture and everything that technical people care about, for good reason, but not my concern. As someone that's more of, I would call myself a business analyst. I don't care what happens. It's great that they do it great. It's great that it's high availability, high scalability, high performance, high everything, but it's not something that I I guess I would only worry about the architecture if it doesn't work, if it fails. That will be when business analysts get uh, um, starts caring about those aspects. What I care about is, as a business analyst, as someone that's in charge of the decision logic, how can I how can I gain more confidence that what I'm pushing is correct and that I'm not hurting the business. I'm actually improving the business by pushing those rules. Uncertainty is probably something we need to define. Um, but it would be on one hand because we don't know how our business rules, when they are changing, how they're going to perform. But it also has to do with the context in which we push our decision logic. It's possible that the market is going to evolve. Maybe people um, will be will have a behavior that is different because of market conditions. Because when we were going through the pandemic, obviously there were lots of changes. A lot of business could not operate like they used to. A lot of people couldn't go to work and things like that. It did affect a lot of our customers in the way they were underwriting life insurance policies. Now there were a ton of drugs that were prescribed that were not before, and that changed a lot of those underwriting rules behind the scene. So being able to react very quickly but safely is what I'm focused on. So I want to describe a couple of use cases that are very real, mostly in the financial services industry. We don't, I don't do cool things like sushi meals on wheels. I do a lot of more traditional, or I'm personally involved with more traditional projects with credit cards and, different types of credit, um, and that's where my use cases are really coming from. So a very real use case will be to change your thresholds. So if you want to expand your applicant pool for your credit card, you may want to look at a lower score. If currently let's say your FICO score limit will be a 600. For those of you that are not in the US, the FICO score is a credit score that will predict your ability and willingness to repay. So if you want to go from, let's say, a FICO score of 600 down to 580 and dig into those subprime type of applicants, um, you have not dealt with them before. You don't know how they will behave. If you give them a credit card today, um, you don't know if they will use it and make you um, a lot of good interest and good revenue, or if they're going to cause you to incur collection fees and where's the balance. And you can model that in your sandbox, but you will only know once you give them a credit card and once you see what they do with it. So that will be the type of uncertainty that I'm talking about. Um, Other type of use cases that are quite frequent in financial services will be to adopt a new data source or a new attribute from your reports. So, for example, for bankruptcy, you might be using one attribute and now you want to consider a second one, or there may be some other um, attributes that are available that will help you make a better decision, better discriminate between two applicants with the same score to know which one is the good one and which one is going to cause you collection fees in the future. Uh, and not only, the fact that this attribute is available, maybe your logic has been using similar attributes in the past and you're not really changing your logic when you go to a judgmental decision or when you auto-decline an applicant. But it might be that you don't know if this attribute is reliable or to what extent it's reliable, or you don't know upfront how well populated this attribute is. Obviously, the credit bureaus that you're working with will have some statistics about those attributes, and they will give you some information. But you will really know how it applies to your pool of applicants once you start using it and seeing if it's something that you can rely on for your decisioning. All of those For all of those use cases, obviously you don't know what you're stepping into, but what you want to be able to anticipate is the how it will affect your business performance. Back to those collection fees versus extra revenue. What is your risk exposure? All of those key performance indicators for your business are things that you want to anticipate as much as possible, and that's what the techniques I will describe will help you do. As well as your business operations. So knowing that you have better applicants is a good thing. But if you're going through too much judgmental decisions, too many referral to for manual review, you might have a logistical problem in your hands dealing with that. And obviously, from an IT perspective, IT will care about DevOps and whatever change in logic, what does it mean for your systems and your SLAs and all of those different type of things. So I will talk about a spectrum of techniques that we see being used. And I'm not going to go into what happens early on with the early testing, but really once you start considering pressing the button for your deployment. So let me start with regression testing and simulation. The purpose of your simulations and all of that sandbox work is to check that your logic applies as expected as much as possible. So typically what we see is a very large number of test cases. In one project that I'm working on, I'm very lucky that I'm getting about, close to 1 million. Well, now we might have gotten over 1 million test cases that can just run every day to see where we have gaps and what we can do for the business. Regression, all of the regression tests that you can do based on um, historical transactions that where you know the outcome, or made up transactions where you know what your expected outcome is because it's manually calculated by someone that knows the business, or because it's a modernization project where you already have a lot of that information available, that will allow you to really automate these million transactions, for example, and being able to pinpoint where the problems are so that you can fix them and have your system work as expected. But where it becomes really interesting is when you have historical transactions that allow you to estimate. So not just um, to make sure that when you process this, you get the approve you expect, or you get the auto decline that is expected, but being able to measure with this new data source, or if I lower my um, score threshold down to 580, how much more am I going to approve? And being able to run some KPIs, run some metrics to measure the quality uh, of those applicants um, uh, uh, ahead of the deployment. So at least you will have assuming that what you see in the rear view mirror is prediction of the future, it will allow you to anticipate the impact on your business performance. But it will not be able to tell you for a fact what your business performance is going to be, obviously. The regression testing and the simulation that we see uh, can be produced so that we can explore all of the execution path to make sure there is no gap in the decision. There are so many tools that can allow you to verify that your logic is correct before you deploy it. But having more extensive test cases will allow you to make sure um, uh, you do handle all of the logic for the full spectrum of data that can come through. And you can have data generators and things like that. Obviously, ChatGPT can also help you produce test cases, but typically we see more automated um, tooling to create very large volumes with the size of what ChatGPT can do. I don't think that we're anywhere close to having millions of transactions being automatically generated by the tool. Um, but for the simulation, what you should be considering and what makes your simulation really very valuable is the quality of your KPIs, being able to really identify what makes sense to measure. And we do encourage, I think Carlos was talking about that yesterday, we do encourage our customers to think about KPIs from day one, even before they start writing rules. You want to explore the data that you have available. You want to um, start thinking in terms of business performance and what is important for your project so that you have the right mindset. But as you run your simulation, typically the set of KPIs will grow over time, and you can refine really what is important for your business to measure and to track and um, to work on, whether it's a distribution, whether it's a calculated metric of the total volume or the average or the exposure, the ratio of decline for your business, and so on. Other concerns, obviously, with the simulation is that we need to run data, obviously. So what is available, whether it's historical or made up. When it's historical, if we're dealing with financial data, obviously there are some personal information concerns, and figuring out what's the right framework to access the data, whether you upload it into your tool or whether you make it available for streaming. All of those concerns come into play. Um, not incredibly complicated, but definitely something that you want to figure out for the performance overall of your system and the ease of access to the simulations for someone that is not technical. So a lot of my projects access like a S3 bucket or something like that on the cloud, so that I can run those test cases without having to access them and to really view those millions of transactions. And I can assure you, I have no idea what would be the first step to creating an S3 bucket. So as a business person, it's just making those things readily available so that they can easily compute those KPIs and compare them. You know, having a baseline and being able to compare after making changes. How is everything affected? Where um, the um, the red flags. So more interesting though is once you get into production, obviously you can have a big bang approach to production. Click on the button. Now all of your rules are running in production. Yesterday was the old rules. Today the new rules are running. But in case of uncertainty where you don't know if your threshold is a good idea or not, you have those applicants with a FICO score between 580 and 600 that may or may not be a good idea. You may want to try that without taking as much risk. You want to lower the risk. So you can define this new strategy with a different threshold as a challenger. So the champion will run the rules like yesterday, and your challenger strategy will try five. And maybe there will be another strategy that will try 590, or maybe one that will go a little bit lower. So you could have multiple candidate strategies so that you can try a different variations. And maybe one strategy is using an attribute and another one is using another attribute, and we can see what's the performance. Or we want to change, instead of FICO, we want to consider the Vantage score. So whatever the variations are, all of those could be in your challenger strategies. They could be testing just one aspect, like those scores or those attributes, but we could be also experimenting with credit line assignment at the same time and see what is the right blend for our decisioning. The way it works is that all of your transactions will be assigned one or the other, but not both. So all of my blue dots on the screen will be running the champion strategy. In this case, it's the vast majority. I don't want to try too many of my applicants. I don't want to challenge my business too much. So my challenger is assigned maybe 10% of the transaction or 5% of the transactions. And you could have one, you could have multiple challengers. It's not just blue and green. You could have some other colors that represent those different thresholds, those different assignments that you want to make. But the key to the assignment is to make it randomly so that the it preserves the statistical relevance of the experiment so that those 5%, 10% of transactions can be representative because they've been randomly selected to represent the quality. So Champion Challenger really allows you to experiment, meaning that you don't have to go all in with all of your changes. You can assign them to a smaller a smaller portion of your transactions, and you can try multiple of those strategies at once. Those threshold changes, all of those changes that you want to do in your decision logic, can run, forever to some extent in your systems. Typically, you would not activate a champion challenger experiment just for a day. You want to let that run for a little bit to be able to see it. But there are some best practices about making sure that you have some feelers for your changes that you want to consider, so that your decision that might be performing awesome today might be very sensitive to changes in market conditions. So you want to have those kind of um, uh, uh, ways to validate that you're still performing by measuring those. So, what you may want to consider in your champion challenger strategy is what to include, what to exclude. If you have some applicants that are VIP for whatever reason, because they are officers of the company, because they are employees, because they are, high income. You may want to either include them systematically or exclude them systematically. So you do want to have some control over your experiment. Consider also the scope of the experiment. We're thinking about our decision logic, our business rules, but it's only one piece. It could be only one piece of an experiment. There may be more where your experiment starts really early on with the type of mailing that you send to the applicants, and pick and choose your strategy as part of these bigger experiments. Whether they receive a red envelope or blue envelope might affect how they respond. Experiment, if it's controlled outside of the business rules, you could be just, or your decision logic could be just one piece of a bigger story. What is really important is the integrity of the experiment, because if you're if you want to explore um, changing your score and changing the credit line assignment, you have to figure out if those two things go hand in hand, or if those are two completely separate experiments, because one experiment could create bias for the other if they are supposed to be independent. So you want to make sure that your credit line assignment, if it's supposed to be independent, is tested with different set of markers. But the key thing of this champion challenger, the key construct, the reason that champion challenger is used extremely um, extensively in financial services is that it allows you to measure the delayed impact of your decisions. So when you change your rule, whether you approve, decline, go into a manual review, it would have an impact on your business operations, but you would not know what is the impact on your business performance until they receive their credit card, and until they start using it and paying their bill. So it might take a few months before you can see if your decision was a good business decision or not. And there is the only way you will know is if you actually give them a credit card um, in your sandbox, or with other techniques. You will not be able to see what their behavior is going to be once they get the credit card in their hands. And real-time metrics typically get associated with champion challenger, because even though your experiment will probably take weeks or months to see what's the real impact, you may want to monitor on a daily basis what's going on with your KPIs. So if one of your experiment is going south, you want to stop it before it's too late. Don't want to just let it run without supervision for a few months before realizing it's a bad idea. So that's really the golden standard in financial services to experiment in production. And strangely enough, we don't see champion challenger being used outside of financial services very much. It seems to be mostly used in that space for whatever reason. Although A/B testing, which is very similar conceptually, is being used widely across all industries. So still one thing to watch to see how it works. Canary deployments, so blue-green deployments, are actually very similar, and a lot of customers use the same mechanism, but with for very different motivation. Typically, those requests come from IT because they want to roll out these new rules, and they are not as concerned about the business performance and what will happen in the end, but they want to make sure that the new rules are not going to break the system. Although I never see them breaking the systems, I don't know why they are so worried about it. Um, but being able to say those are the new rules, and we're going to deploy them to 5% of our transactions, and we'll keep increasing until we roll it out across the board, or whether you want to do it state by state or whatever segmentation, uh, in my opinion, ends up being quite similar to Champion Challenger, because it will produce this dual type of logic being deployed in the system. So what's interesting is that you can use the exact same mechanism that Champion Challenger offers you um, to appease the mind of your technical people. One thing that we see quite a bit as well is shadow execution. And from what I understand, the previous presentation was talking about it, which is interesting because it's not quite often that people are familiar with shadow execution. So it's similar to Champion Challenger in the sense that we have different candidates that we want to consider. But what is different is that you may not be ready to go live with your challenger. You want to know what it would do, but you don't want it to do it, if that makes sense. Um, the concept of shadow execution is something that we see a lot in financial services and elsewhere, but typically through very convoluted implementations where there are tags to say your action cannot execute and things like that, rather than just having a new strategy and saying you should execute on the back end without making a decision. So back to my dots. Now the difference with the other one is that champion, the blue execution, is the one that always executes. The action that will be taken is always the action of the champion, but the challenger also executes on the back end, and the results will be stored, not applied to the transaction. So if the champion says you declined because you're less than 600, your FICO score is less than 600, but your champion says, no, you should be approved because I want to lower to 580, the approved decision will be stored and will not, and no credit card will be sent to this applicant. So you get the dual execution for those transactions. So it's similar conceptually to Champion Challenger, um, but there is no side effect. Well, Champion Challenger obviously would have a side effect for all of the challengers that can be used. So because there is no side effect, you don't know. It doesn't give you the insight as to what's going to happen in the future. Um, but it might be a first step to ensure that there is no technical issue with a challenger. So being able to see that it performs, to be able to see what your KPIs would have been in terms of business ops. Um, but mostly it's for those decision analytics so that you can explore what would be the business performance for those shadow execution. The nice thing, in my opinion, is to allow you to just flip a switch to say, give me those numbers, and being able to start collecting them real time, at, the same way you would get them for your actual implementation. So yeah, let me just get to the takeaways so that we can take a break for lunch. Um, so the as I said, the deployment can be very straightforward. Just going through a big bang, click on the button, and everything gets updated into your production system. But the simulation testing ahead of time is something that we see more and more customers uh, enabling in a major way in terms of the size of the data samples they have, in terms of the sophistication of the KPIs they produce. I think that 10 years ago, a lot of those reports were fairly simplistic about distribution of how many are approved and declined. But now they they don't start, they do have quite extensive KPIs that they're measuring to compare business performance on those historical samples. So I think all of these infrastructures become more streamlined. But what's interesting is in production, being able to experiment with different variations at a lower cost and building your confidence as you go, either by affecting the changes with Champion Challenger or not, and just collecting decision analytics about your business performance. There you go. So with that, if you have some questions, I can answer them.
Okay, thank you, Carole-Ann. Any questions? Yeah, apparently people tired, and thank you for giving them a chance for a longer break. Any questions? No questions. Okay, thanks again, Carole-Ann, and we will take break until noon. And Miriam, please get back 5 minutes earlier. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.